National insurance. National insurance was the matter that it's been long favoured by governments as a way of raising tax without raising tax, because it's not called tax, even though it's tax, really. Everybody knows that. But we'll call it national insurance and we can raise that and everybody will think we're not raising tax, really. The Labour government had already announced these rates. This was partly in the budget 09 and then partly in the pre-budget report, because originally in budget 09 the rates were going to go at 0.5% a bit. It was going to be a two-stage increase. Then in the pre-budget report it was a one-stage increase. Those are the rates. A lot of hoo-ha has been made about the national insurance, not least by David Cameron, who latched on to employers' national insurance and said it's a jobs tax, which it is. It is a jobs tax. It is slightly odd that in his world, the job tax seems to be the last 1%. You can have 12.8% national insurance contributions, and that's not a jobs tax, but the moment you put it to 13.8, that 1% is a jobs tax, which sounds rather peculiar to me, but there you go. But they're the limits. They've all gone up by 1%, or will do from the 6th of April 2011. And what are they going to do? They're meddling with the thresholds, basically. So Cameron's way of heading off the jobs tax is not to stop the increase, but to up the threshold. So from the 6th of April 2011, and I assume payroll systems will cope with this admirably, but there will be different starting points for employers and employees' national insurance contributions. And employers, we are told, will be £21 a week higher than would otherwise be the case. What they don't tell you quite so overtly is that pushing up the thresholds at the bottom is one thing, but if you push them up at the top, you get more income. You get more of the taxable income charged to national insurance at these new high rates, the 12% rate, the 9% rate for self-employed. So that's what we've got. National insurance is wildly expensive, and we need to think about ways of mitigating that. We spent our lives thinking about ways of mitigating that, haven't we? Well, those ways of mitigating it still exist, and I'll come to those at the end. Capital allowances. This is slightly a curate's egg, let's put it that, good in parts. People were worried that capital allowances were going to get a pasting, because we had been told that corporation tax rates were going to be reduced, the headline rates would be reduced, but allowances and reliefs would be reduced as well, so that the tax take wasn't adversely affected. And everybody interpreted that as meaning research and development credits will go, and capital allowances will be either eliminated or substantially slashed. And what's happened? Well, one of them has been substantially slashed, the thing called the annual investment allowance, which is particularly useful to small businesses because you get 100% allowances on the first amount. And what's the first amount? Well, it was £50,000. It was then increased to £100,000 from April 2010, and now we're told it's going to be cut to £25,000. That is a big cut. That is a big cut, and the people who are going to feel it most are the small people, because they're the people who got most benefit from it. What else has happened? Writing down allowances are going to be changed with effect from April 2012, again, but in a relatively modest way. Currently, the rates of writing down allowances are either 20% or 10%, depending on what sort of asset you've got, which pool they're in, and they're going to be cut to 18% and 8%, not a huge amount. And then we have funny rules. If you've got an accounting period that straddles April 2012, you have to have a hybrid rate. So you have to go to a funny website that tells you how to basically take two numbers, divide them both by 365, multiply them by a number that adds up to 365 and add them together again. But all very tricky, I suppose, for non-accountants, but other accountants, no problem at all. I don't know how many of our industrialists out there are going to rush to get zero-emission goods vehicles. That's electric to you and me. It's a bit like a milk float, isn't it, really? The more I think about it, we can go back to having milk floats. But 100% first year allowances for that sort of thing. So I'm sure people will be out there doing their best. Right. Inheritance tax. Nothing was said at all. Not one thing was said. But those of you who've heard me speak before will know that I'm not shy about talking about things that weren't said, because often there's quite a lot of interest in that. So inheritance tax, no change. In one of the press releases, we were told that they are looking at bringing inheritance tax, particularly when inheritance tax is being avoided using trusts, and there's not many other ways of avoiding it, within something called the DOTAS rules. DOTAS, what's that, you shout? Disclosure of tax avoidance schemes. In other words, if you dream up a wacky scheme to avoid inheritance tax, you've got to tell the revenue about it. At the moment, inheritance tax, whilst it is a tax, it isn't a prescribed tax for the purpose of the regulations, and they're looking at ways to bring it in. But other than that, nothing. So inheritance tax, I've got some planning ideas, which I'll give you at the end. Very important, because it's an expensive tax and a very, very punitive tax in my view. It's taxing your savings after you've paid tax on them as you've gone along. Pensions. Now, pensions, where are we with pensions? We are in a very unhappy place, it has to be said. On the 22nd of April 2009, they introduced the rules about people not getting full tax relief on their pension contributions if they're high earners. And high earners for this purpose could be 150,000, could be 130,000. There's sort of funny little definitions that you've got to be aware of. At the same time as announcing that these rules would start from the 6th of April 2011, they said, oh, but under our anti-forestalling concept, we're a bit worried that you'll all rush out and fill your boots with pension contributions, so we'll have a second set of rules, which are from now. So we have got rules now which stop you getting tax relief if you're a so-called high earner. What have we been told? Very little about that. There is an indication that they recognise that these rules are somewhat unworkable. They have said that changes that have been introduced by Finance Act 2010 will be abolished, which is sort of the rules that are kicking in from the 6th of April 2011. But we've already got rules which are very similar that exist from the 22nd of April 2009. So it doesn't mean, great, fantastic, let's go and pay huge pension contributions. Doesn't mean that at all. But what they are sort of indicating is that they will limit the amount you can put in. At the moment, there is something called the annual allowance. And the annual allowance is at some relatively high amount, £255,000. What is the point of having an annual allowance of £255,000 if you're earning more than 150,000 or 130 in certain circumstances, your tax relief is severely curtailed? Isn't there a better way of doing this? Well, of course there is. All sorts of better ways of doing it.